Hello everyone, and my name is Mohammed Junaid. Today we'll be learning about friction. So what is friction? Friction is the resistance offered by the surfaces that are in contact with each other when they move over each other, like the car's wheel and the road. What are the factors that affect friction? Friction is a force that is dependent on two external factors. Number one, on the nature of the two surfaces that are in contact. So what does this mean? Well, friction is dependent on the smoothness or roughness of the two surfaces that are in contact with each other. When the surface is smooth, the friction between the two reduces as there is not much interlocking or irregularities taking place. We'll be talking about this later. While the surface is rough, the friction increases or gets a rise. On the force that is acting on these surfaces, meaning the external force that is applied. When the force is applied along with the irregularities, friction increases. You should remember both of these. How does friction increase? Well, friction increases as surfaces are made rougher. Friction increases when the force between the two objects are increased. What do you think causes friction? When we see any object, we can see the smooth surface. But when the same object is viewed under a microscope, even the smooth appearing object has rough edges. Tiny hills and grooves can be seen through the microscope, and they are known as irregularities of the surface. So irregularities are the tiny rough edges on a surface. So when one object is moved over the other, these irregularities on the surface get entangled, giving a rise to friction. More the roughness, more will the irregularities, and greater will be the force applied. This is another easy definition for the cause of friction. Friction is caused due to the interlocking of irregularities between the two surfaces in contact. Smooth surfaces have minute irregularities between the two surfaces. Rough surfaces have larger irregularities between the two surfaces. So force of friction is more if the surfaces are rough. Remember this. These are the facts that friction depends on: roughness, smoothness, inclination. There are four types of friction: static friction, sliding friction, rolling friction, fluid friction. We'll be learning about all of this now. Number one, static friction. Static friction is defined as the frictional force that acts between the surfaces when they are at rest with respect to each other, meaning a surface and an object not moving. The magnitude of the static force is equal in the opposite direction when a small amount of force is applied. When the force increases, at some point maximum static friction is reached, like a lamp on a table or a pillow on a carpet. Here are some more examples, like skiing against the snow, creating heat by rubbing both hands together, or you sitting on the sofa. Sliding friction. Sliding friction is defined as the resistance that is created between any two objects when they are sliding against each other, like you sliding on the slide. Here are some more examples. Sliding of the block across the floor, two cars sliding against each other in a deck. Number 3, rolling friction. Rolling friction is defined as the force which resists the motion of a ball or wheel and is the weakest type of force, like a log running down the ground or the car's moving wheels. Here comes the most tricky one: fluid friction. Fluid friction is defined as the friction that exists between the layers of fluid when they are moving relative to each other, like the flow of ink in pens or the swimming. Brainstorming questions relating friction. How do you think friction produces heat? When surfaces in contact move relative to each other, the friction between the two surfaces converts kinetic energy into heat. This is something very interesting, right? Well, what do you think friction is useful in? Well, friction helps us in walking. Well, friction is also important in many more things, like the movement of the car on the ground. Why do you think friction is a non-conservative force? Well, friction is a non-conservative force because the amount of work done by the friction depends on the path. Well, this is something confusing, right? Now, remember this. Friction will never get affected by the increase in speed, okay? This will also be used as the old information. Can friction be zero? No, it is not possible to have zero friction because every surface, no matter how lubricated, will have minor irregularities in them. So friction can never be zero. The surface will have at least some irregularities inside them. Remember, we said to look under a microscope and you will see some irregularities. Lubricants and ball bearings are used for reducing the friction to make it more slippery. This image shows contact force. Friction is a contact force. Well, what do you think contact force is? Contact force is when bodies have physical contact with each other, like muscular force or frictional force. Thanks a lot, everyone.